Alright, for this lesson in Adobe Animate CC, what we're going to be doing is working with tweens, but we're going to be working with nested symbols or nested tweens. As always, we're going to start with an ActionScript 3.0 document, just because when we actually render this, it just renders a lot faster, and everything will be eventually converted to YouTube. Now you'll notice that I'm still in the animator. If you haven't switched the animator, you don't have to, but if you did forget and you want to switch the animator, just go into Windows, go over to Workspaces, and then of course you got the animator, and by default you're left in classic. Alright, so for this one what we're going to do is we're going to draw a bumblebee flying around the screen and with its wings flapping attached to its body. So in order to do this, we're going to actually have two layers. The first layer we're going to have is called the background layer, which is going to have our flower and maybe grass or clouds or whatever that might be. And then the next one is going to be the bee, or bumblebee. As far as the background goes, I'm not going to spend a lot of time to this, but just quickly with the brush tool, I'm just going to draw a black flower or something like that. Yes, I know it's super crap. Alright, good enough. Now going on to my B layer, I'm going to go ahead and start drawing here. So I will have a black stroke, and as far as the fill goes, I'm just going to go with yellow. There we go. So here's my oval. Draw a little head. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and just draw some little antenna here. Smile, and let's do a couple of eyes real quick. Oh, that's definitely the wrong spot. Okay, and I'm just going to give him some stripes. So with that, I go over here and increase my stroke. By default, it's for 1. I'm going to put up to 5. And we'll just give it a little bit of a stinger right over there too. Maybe some legs. Okay, so from here I've got my bee minus the wings. I don't want to put the wings in at this point. So I'm going to take this entire object here, highlight it with the window, and then I'm going to convert this to symbol. If you recall how to do that, it's just under modify, convert to symbol, or you can just hit F8 on your keyboard as a shortcut, which is probably faster. And like anything, you always have to name your symbols and your layers, otherwise you will get confused as this starts adding tons of objects and layers. It gets pretty confusing. And there it shows up right into my library. If you're not already in the library, remember there is a tab right over here that you can always click on, and you can see the entire list. Now, in terms of converting this to a tween, that's quite easy. Everything has to be in symbol format for it to actually be a motion tween. And so I'm just going to go to my timeline on the B layer with the B representing this little dot here on the timeline. Right-click, create a motion tween. Now, I know that my playhead is over here and then my background's completely disappeared. I'm not too worried about that right now. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to position the B where I think it's going to be roughly on the flower, and that's pretty much the spot over there. And heck, I'll even just bend the path over here so it can sort of have it kind of come into a curve there. So to render this whole thing in preview or movie, I'm going to go Control-Enter on my keyboard. And you can see that I've got obviously a few problems. B's probably moving too fast, as well too the flower kind of comes and goes. And we're going to work on both problems. So let's close that window off here. So to slow down this animation, I'm just going to click and drag, and I'm just going to move my timeline. Because if you recall from the last lesson, the more frames that you have, the slower the animation actually goes. Now, in addition to that, what I also want to do is I want to take my object, or my bee, and I want him not to kind of follow an arc that's smooth, because bees and flies and mosquitoes, they all sort of kind of fly randomly. And so I'm just going to grab the body here, and I'm just going to move that. Now, watching the timeline up above, how as soon as I drag and drop the object, not the curve, but the object, and what you see here is a new dots in my tween animation, and you can see I've got a new position right over here too. Same thing, I'm going to come over here and take the body with the bee and up here to give a bit of a random movement. and then we'll just go like that. Perfect. So let's preview this by going Control Enter. All right, that looks a lot better. We want the bee to probably come to a rest for maybe a couple seconds on the flower before we start getting into the wings, and we'll also take care of the problem with the background disappearing in just a second here. All right, so for the very first thing, we want the bee just to land on the flower, just sort of stay in the spot. So I'm just going to go all the way over to maybe frame 100 here. And while I'm in that frame, I'm just going to right click, and what I want to do is insert frame. Now what I'm doing here is extending the motion tween, but I'm not going to move the body of the bee. So you're going to see that the last position the bee was in is going to be in frame 51 or 52 here, and then from this point on, the bee is just going to sit here and do nothing. Now as far as taking care of the problem with the flower disappearing, it's going to be much like inserting frames, but we're going to be doing it for this layer. I'm going to go right click, insert frame, and now the background you can see gets copied over every single frame along the timeline over here. And so when I do a preview by going Control Enter, the background not only keeps up, but the bee also stays. Alright, so that's just half of what we need to do. The other half now is to actually add wings. Now if we were to create another layer here with just the wings, the problem that we'd have is trying to get the wings to follow the bee is going to be really super hard. So instead what we're going to do is we're going to actually put a symbol inside of a symbol, and that symbol is going to keep up to the bee body. Here's what I mean. So going to my bee layer, I'm going to go into my bee right over here, and I'm going to double click on it. Now anytime you double click on a symbol, you're actually inside the symbol itself. Now you'll notice that we're in scene 1. As I double click on the bee, now we're actually inside the bee, and you can see right over here this is being added right below the timeline. So from here, what I can do is I can add a set of wings, but before I do that, I have to make sure that I work with separate layers, because the general rule is 1 tween per layer. So let me call this layer B, and now what I want to do is I want to create a new layer, and that new layer we're going to call wings. Alright, so now I can take my little tool here, and what I plan to do is I plan to go ahead and draw some wings. So from there, if I want to create a motion tween out of this, what I got to do is I got to select the wings, so I'm going to double click on it so that it's all highlighted. You'll notice it isn't a separate layer. I'm going to go modify, convert to symbol, and we'll call this wings. Perfect. From here, what I'm going to do is go right click, create motion tween. Now, obviously again, the bee has disappeared. We're going to fix that problem in just a second. But now what we have to do is actually animate these wings. So in order to do so, I'm going to take my free transform tool right over here, and I want to move my pivot point. So, because if you notice right now, if I leave my pivot point in the center, and I go like this, you can see that the wings are sort of collapsing to the center. I don't want that. So by me taking my pivot point and moving it downwards here, and then I actually squash this, it actually gets anchored from where the pivot point is, and I can also just take this and just skew this just like this. So as I scrub my playhead, you'll notice that this is what the wing's going to look like. Probably going a little too slow, so I'm just going to collapse this just a bit. And then from here, my body, obviously, for the bee is not keeping up with the wings. And so I'm going to go right click, and I'm going to go insert frame. And now you can see everything's being copied over here all the way throughout. Now to preview this, I'm going to go to scene 1, Control Enter for it to render. And that's pretty much it. So now you're going to go ahead and create your own bee. Pay a lot more attention to the artwork than I did. Obviously, I'm just trying to get through this quickly for you, but that is how you do motion tweens with nested symbols. Hope this helps.